Today we're going to look at what are wireframes, who should they be for, and why do we make them? Let's talk about that.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut. Today we're inside of our sketchbooks and we're going to be taking a look at a guide on how to sketch wireframes. Now, you might be asking what a wireframe is, what it's used for. We're going to go through all of that and I'm going to show you the way that I like to draw a wireframe. Basically, we're going to go from start to finish and then I'm going to take you through a few examples on what I like to do when I'm putting a wireframe together. Now, what is a wireframe? Why make them? Who are they for? Basically, you put a wireframe together. It was the first step when you're making a design. It might be a magazine article or a web page or a book or whatever. It's just a really quick way to sketch out your ideas for how you're going to lay out the amount of information that you need to put on the page. For example, they can be explored by yourself or as part of a team. At work, for example, I create wireframes with one of my colleagues for the UI designs that we're doing. For TipTut and things like that, I do it all by myself. By my master's degree work for that work, I sort of do it by myself, then hand it off to somebody else to review, so that the major decisions are made by me, and then they can tweak and improve them. They're not meant to be a final product. They are there basically to make sure you can get your ideas out on paper before you get too far into the design process, where any mistakes that might pop up, any issues that you might have with your design are ironed out before you start working on the computer, before things start being created. For example, you might have a user interface where they have to perform 5 different functions, and you, in your initial thoughts, might have only accounted for 4 of them. You might not realize you haven't accounted for the 5th until you've actually started designing. So we're going to go through a guide on how to create these wireframe sketches. Before we get started, let's just have a quick flick through my book. This has got some wireframes that I've been doing for various things, a presentation for work. So you can see, for example, here I'm laying out some complex numerical information. Here there's going to be some infographic kind of stuff. This is just not a wireframe, but interesting nonetheless. Here's some wireframes for Basics for Beginners book that I was putting together. So you can see it doesn't necessarily have to be for digital work. It can be for print work as well. You can see I'm trying different ways for information on the back cover or the front cover of the book. Some more stuff for Basics for Beginners here, keeping it very loose. Some pages from the same process. And some more things from a PowerPoint. So infographic information, text information, occupancy information, that sort of thing. Here's some wireframes for a horizontal scrolling website that I was trying to make work. And so on. You can see here's a basic wireframe in detail for just a UI drop-down section. This is some old few minutes of design stuff. And so on. I think that might be it for a little while at least. Yeah. Some sketches I wouldn't really call wireframes. Here's a wireframe for some information I was blocking out. So you can see how they all sort of share the same characteristics. There'll be the dimensions roughly of what you'll be creating, and then an indication of where that important information is going to be laid out. Another example might be here, for example, when I was creating my choke points activity tracking app. What I actually did was start off with some tiny thumbnails, wireframes down here, blocking out things like where I wanted the calendar information to go, how my app icons might appear, whether they're going to slide up from the bottom, whether they take up the whole screen. Here I was trying to decide how to show analytic information. And then along these pages, I sort of broke that down into a bit more detail. You can see that my icons consist of nothing more really than circles. Content, such as images, consists nothing more of just a box with an X through it to indicate an image. This is all the sort of stuff we're going to explore now in today's tutorial. So, some key things to think about then before we get down onto, how to represent the certain things. What would a heading look like? What would an image look like in a wireframe? There's just a few things to consider beforehand. The first thing is making sure that you connect all of your lines. You have to keep these things neat because you don't know who else is going to be using them. For example, if I were to draw a small wireframe for a phone and I make it really sloppy, like so. And then I go, okay, well, there's a box for some information and it's an image. Yeah. Now you can clearly see that there's some issues with this initial wireframe straight away. All these little gaps here where the lines don't connect, or the lines here aren't neat, they're open for interpretation. If I draw this, you know that that is a corner, okay? That is a single line and a corner. That is a connected element. If I draw something like this, that could be possibly misconstrued. Someone else you're handing these designs off to might think that this is an actual intended gap, whereas really all you've done is just been sloppy in how you've drawn your rectangle. So if we take this as an example here, you just want to make sure, now you don't have to follow a grid. You know, here for example I've got gridded paper and I'm not really following it. Apologies if any of this is really wonky. I'm left-handed, so I usually draw with the paper 90 degrees, like so. Okay, but that's probably going to be very confusing for you guys. So I'm trying to draw with it upright, but what that means is my lines might go a bit wonk every now and then. Okay, we can see again already that could be misconstrued just because I've drawn it slightly wonky. So you just need to make sure that any lines that you do make are neat, they are connected, and they are solid, unless you are intending to communicate a gap. That is clearly a rectangle. There's no gaps in that. If I were to draw a separation along here for what might be perhaps a row of icons, I'd make sure each one of these icon circles closes. Basically, this rule is keep things neat, but the main thing I think about when things are kept neat are connected corners. Yeah, so you can see no matter what elements I'm drawing, no matter what they represent, if they're intended to be a closed item, then they are a closed item. It's as simple as that. Number 2, work in pen. Keep everything. The amount of times I've seen people trying to draw wireframe with pencil. First of all, it encourages you to be messy. Second of all, it might not turn up well when you take a photograph, when you show to somebody. Third of all, it will smudge. And fourth of all, you'll be encouraging yourself to erase. If you make a mistake, yeah, and you go, oops, I didn't want that to be a curved corner, I wanted it to be a straight one. You're going to reach over for your rubber and you're going to erase it, and then you're going to come back in and you're going to fix it. Now, why is that a bad thing? You should never be erasing any of your wireframes because it's explorative. Doesn't matter if they look good or not, that's not the point. The point is they're supposed to be useful. Now, that information that you just erased might be useful later on. Say, for example, I draw here and I give it a curved corner on one of the boxes. And then I decide, oh, actually, I don't like that. I want all of my boxes to have rigid corners. What if somebody you're handing off to in the design process says, I actually quite like that curved corner? Perhaps we could consider that. Maybe curved corners are going to work better because it's supposed to be more of a friendly looking interface that we're drawing here. And the hard corners make it look unfriendly and unapproachable. They're not going to have that thought if you've erased your image with the curved corner. Okay? Now, I've used someone else as an example there, but that could be true of your own example. You could look back on your old sketches and see things that you would have erased if you'd made it in pencil, but you think, actually, I don't want to use that specifically, but it might lead me towards something better. For example, say, for example, here, I draw a tiny rectangle and this is going to be like a title, and I go, oh, no, actually, I don't like that. So I scribble through it. Or I erase it. Not going to see that, it's gone. If I go, oh, actually, I quite like that. Maybe each one of our titles in our websites can have an element underneath it as an underline. Maybe that's going to lead to a more playful website. Maybe we can have some abstract geometry thrown in there as background elements. Yeah. So it leads to more creative thinking when you don't erase things. So this could be, for example, a card that slips inside a brochure, and you've just had a more creative thought there purely because you didn't erase something, purely because you were working in pen. Keep everything. You'll notice that as we flick back through this book, everything I've ever drawn is in pen, even if it's sloppy, even if it's messy, yeah? It doesn't matter because it's not about being neat. It's about keeping your thoughts down. And the one times I did start drawing in pencil earlier on, like here, for example, you can see it's all started to get smudged. You're losing information. Here, it doesn't stand out as well. I looked past that just because it's in pencil. Just work in pen. You'll find yourself going back to things that you would have definitely looked over before. Try to think outside in. Number 3. Try to think about all of the functionality your intended design is going to have. For example, say this is a website where we want users to click through onto a button that leads them through to the next page. Now, what information might we have to display? We might have a title. We might have a subheading. We might have some text. We might have an image of a person. And we're probably going to have a button of some kind to lead them through to that next page. Now, if I just start drawing and I go, okay, well, here's like a nice little website design that we've got here. I know I need my person like that. I forgot we should put a title in. And then there's a paragraph. Oh, no, wait, I've drawn the paragraph. We need a subtitle. Oh, I can't really fit a subtitle there. So I'll just say subtitle goes there. Then there's a button. We can squeeze that button in down there. Yeah. That was me thinking linearly. Oh, I'm just drawing through how I'd like these things to go out on the page. Whereas if we start thinking from the outside in, we know these concepts that we're going to have. We know that we need a title, a subheading, some copy, a space for a person to fit, and a button. So what's going to be the thing that's on top, the most important element? Well, probably that call to action button. We're going to want that to be in a prominent position, separated from the rest. Yeah. Separated perhaps from our little friend. Now, people like seeing faces. When they see a face, they're more encouraged to click. So we'll make sure that's a bold element. We might need a title. And now look, we've got room for a title, room for our subtitle, room for our text. Because we thought from the outside in, we considered the whole piece before we started drawing any single element. Title, subtitle, text, person, button, all on the page. Simple. Think about the larger concept first and then work inwards. So you should highlight unique or important elements. Now, when we get onto ways to represent the different elements here, like for example, here I've said this is a title and I just drew a box. Might not make sense to you, but it will shortly. If there are unique elements that can't be reproduced in a simple shape, like for example, when I sketch, I know that every heading, every title I ever do is a large box, rectangular, like so. Well, how could that not be perhaps an image? Yeah. Well, I know when I do an image, I drew a box with an X in it. That sort of thing. So you have your own set of rules that you need to stick to each time you do a wireframe, but oftentimes you will get unique elements. Like for example, if we flick back here, these basics for beginners logos. Now I know when I draw copy, I just draw a single straight line. I know that when I draw a title, I just draw a normal rectangle. So this is going to be some copy and a title. A logo though, however, is a unique element that I've drawn out individually each time because I know that needs to be prominent and is a unique element. Within that unique element, I've drawn a scribble, which I use for subtitles, inside that logo, if the area is too small. But because it's within its own unique element boundaries, it's still recognized as that unique thing. Here, these icons on the book are unique elements. They could have just been a circle with an X through them to represent that that's where an image is going to go or an icon is going to go. But they're important and unique elements. For example, here, this character might be an important or unique element. Say this was for a business card. Okay, we've got a business card design here. We know that what you're going to need, yeah? On a business card, you need your name. That's fine. You're probably going to need an email address, maybe a phone number, maybe just some smaller extra information. Now, if we were going to do an image of my face on this business card, you might do an X to indicate a background image. Now that's what I do, yeah? But that doesn't dictate in any way that image is going to be of me. If I know it's just going to be a random image, it'll be on a blog, that blog will have space to allocate for an image that's going to change each time we make a new blog. This, however, is a unique element, so we draw that in. It doesn't have to be good. For example, here I've got a really long neck, but it doesn't matter because all we've determined is that there is space there for a figure of a person, whatever that might be. Say, for example, you're doing a poster and you know that on this poster you're going to have a big title of the yeah, bam, like this. Doesn't matter what that title is for now. You know that along the bottom you're going to have a bunch of spiel about who's in it and who produced it and blah blah blah. You also know that you're going to have an area for perhaps a collection of characters. Yeah, maybe one guy standing there like this and he's got a gun. He's got legs. And then maybe there's a big face up this way. You can see that I've got Star Wars on the brain, you know. There's a big head person here. And then there's a dude with a lightsaber there. Now, I can't draw. You couldn't possibly tell what any of this is, really. But we do know that it's a unique element. We do know that this line indicates the vague area where those unique elements are going to be. If I were just drawn this poster and said background image, title, copy, that's useless to me. Think about unique elements. So I've just been randomly scribbling. We need to determine ways to represent these different elements that we have. So I've just got a list of things here. Now, this is just the way that I do it. If you want to do it differently, that's absolutely fine. This is just the way that I draw things. Wireframes are completely unique. People will probably tell me that I'm doing a billion things wrong here, but so long as I understand what information I put on the page and I can translate that information into a design, then I'd argue that there is no right or wrong. Titles, subtitles, text, images, buttons, shadows, icons, backgrounds. Let's take a look at this little sketch that I did to start off our tutorial today. We have a bounding box, okay? We have some text, which if it's important text, you might want to write out like I did with my Basics for Beginners logo. Indications of titles, subtitles, copy, buttons, images, graphical elements. When I'm drawing a title, unless that title has to be specific copy, and all I'm doing is just making an area for a title to go, I like to literally draw just a simple rectangle. I know that that is text. I do a lot of work in UI. I do a lot of work in websites, things like that. I know that that title copy content is going to change, and all we need to do is allocate space for it. Sometimes I might break that title up if I know that it's going to be quite long, quite wordy. I might do several blocks like so. Usually I'll do one block per line. If I know that that content is going to run over onto a second line, then I'll just do a single block and then a secondary block underneath it. Subtitles. I do a scribble, but it's a controlled scribble, I suppose. If I have a title, I know that underneath that I'm probably going to have a subtitle, and that for me is just a zigzagged line, like so. The reason I do that is because I think of like a title as like a big blocky in my brain. It doesn't matter whether it is in the page or not. Yeah, like a title is like a big blocky important piece of text. It's going to be few words, but it's going to be important words. I think of a subtitle as maybe it's got a little bit more fluidity to it. Yeah. It's got more words. They're going to be longer. You might have 6 or 7 words in a subtitle and 1 or 2 in a main title. Hence why my subtitles are this zigzag line. It's the most simplistic representation of text. You know, text that goes here that isn't a title. Normal text then, I'll literally just do a line. If I have a title and I have a subtitle, maybe I've got a subtitle across 2 lines, yeah? My text will literally be like so. I'll usually do 3 or 4 lines. Then I'll make sure that each of those lines is roughly the same length, and I'll put a shorter one on the bottom to indicate alignment. Yeah, so that might be left aligned text. Boom. You've got center aligned text, and you've got right aligned text. Simple as that. Honestly, I've just taken these icons directly from word processor in design when you're choosing alignment. Makes sense to me. If that's what's indicated in there, might as well take that along to my wireframes. Images. I do a box with a cross through it. Simple as that. That is an image. A video, I'll do a box with a triangle in it. Everyone knows that that means video. Everyone in the world. Unique images, however, like we've already spoken about, I will do the most simple version of what it is that I want to see. Yeah? Doesn't matter what that something is, as long as you can get across the point. It's a skateboard, that's a person, you know. That's a tree. Simple as that. This isn't about artistic skill. Wireframes do not require artistic skill. Here, for example, that's a building. Everyone can see that. That's a dude walking through a door. That's a dude and he's halfway filled up and it's got the word 85%. Perhaps that's going to be 2 different colours that represent 85%. Yeah, that's a dude sitting down. That's an angry face. This is jiu-jitsu and it's supposed to be a man passing somebody's guard, grabbing his knees. But I know that's what it is. Doesn't matter if anyone else knows what that is. Here, imagery, yeah? Distinct logo imagery. Here, I know that these icons are going to be the icons that I explored previously because I spent a lot of time drawing them. Therefore, in this design, where the important aspect is the box and dimensions thereof, they're just circles. Different imagery here on this page. Simple shapes, okay? This is a computer screen with some elements on it. Yeah. Here I've gone into more detail where I know this piece of paper is going to have to wrap around this book because the imagery is important. It's a unique element. Therefore, I've highlighted it. Otherwise, imagery is a box with a cross through it. A button, regardless of how that style is going to be, whether you've got round corners in your design or not, I always draw a button in my wireframes like this. To me, it just makes sense. If I really want to hammer the point home, I'll probably do like a little raised line to indicate that it's like risen off the page a little bit. If it's got a specific function, I might write that specific function on the button. Otherwise, how do I indicate buttons? Just by making them just a little bit 3D. It's as simple as that. That immediately shows push me, yeah? Like, whereas if I do something like this, that shows something that has been pushed. Yeah, that's a button that has been pushed. That's a button that has been pushed. Buttons. Add a little bit of depth to them. Shadows then. How do I indicate shadows? Well, usually I will do a series. If we just say shadow, I'll just do a series of hashed lines. To me, that looks like a drop shadow. It indicates an element that's going to stand out. It's going to jump off the page, yeah, without going to, you know, the difficulty of trying to actually render a shadow in a sketch. I don't know how else you'd do it. Icons, same as images. Put icons up here. If they're specific, for example, when we were exploring the choke points app from before, like so, I might draw specific icons once. Then depending on what page I'm on in that app, I might only draw a scribble of the icon, depending on what page that is, and the rest will just be circles. Most of the time I'll determine icons outside of a UI, like here. Here's me exploring some icons. And then I know that I just need to allocate space for those icons within the design. Icon, 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 icon. You know what an icon's going to be because you're going to be building this thing, designing this thing. Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, that's an icon. Backgrounds. How do we determine what is foreground and what is background, especially in like a UI design? What I will usually do is I'll draw my bounding box. Say, for example, this is for a web page, like so. I've got a header of this user interface, and I've got a sidebar of this user interface. And then, oh, my camera's gone all out of focus. Ooh. Oh, well, blurry me. I've only just realized. Sorry. I'll draw an element here. I'm testing a new setup, in case you couldn't tell. It's not working, evidently. This will be a boxed element. Now, at the moment, that looks very messy. Not only have I ballsed up a few lines, but it's difficult to tell what's the foreground and the background. So what I will usually do is make sure that everything is connected. Then I'll just add a rough indication of darker color. Yeah. Now at a glance, you can tell that that's background here, and this is foreground here. Foreground, I'll try and leave as clean as possible. If it's a highlighted figure or element, I'll usually hash it as well. But that's really all that I do to indicate foreground or background. Your wireframes, if they're getting that complicated, then they're not wireframes. You're moving on to something more than that, than you're designing. Yeah. Like here, for example, here's the front of the book. I've hashed this area to indicate it is a separate wrap around. Same thing here. Hash the shadows there to indicate a darker section, to indicate a fold. Same thing here. This is clearly the cover of the book because the pages are brighter. And that is all there is to it. That is my guide on how to sketch a wireframe. So thank you very much for watching. Apologies for the blurry camera. It's really annoying me now. I'm going to fix it again. Ready? Nope. Didn't work. Oh well. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, everybody. If you did, let me know if you want more of these kinds of things, and hopefully I'll see you all next time on another episode of TipTut. See you then.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.